on Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, it was just really thought provoking, and I had to read over it a couple of times. But what do you think the government can do to kind of manage policing? Because policing is an issue, particularly in my community. There are some people that feel that they've been systematically targeted by the current measures in place.
Yeah.
So, how do you think policing can be improved so people within my community, the BAME community, can have more trust in the current systems in place and they don't feel a sense of maybe victimization or injustice?
Yeah. I think the first thing we have to do, which is what I was trying to do in that blog post, is to recognize that very large numbers of people really are feeling the injustice of racism.
Mm.
And denial on all sorts of subjects is a very powerful and dangerous force. And denial about racism is a powerful and dangerous thing. And I mean, I'd never met prejudice personally until I became an MP. And then once you become a Tory MP, people are prejudiced about what that must mean. But, growing up in Cornwall, which was when I grew up, not very diverse,
Mm-hmm.
I'd never met racism. I've certainly obviously never been the object of it. And it would never have occurred to me as a child that people would be racist. Since we're having a Christian conversation, Galatians 3 is very good on this about equality. It's radically egalitarian.
Mm-hmm.
But part of it comes down, the challenge for me is we've got to put love in our hearts, right? So putting love in our hearts, I think in this subject very practically begins with recognizing that when a person who is not white says that they feel they have suffered racism and injustice, you have to hear them and have the humility to hear them. And I fear that too often people have not heard them. And sometimes when people then go through the motions of talking about being anti-racist, or they make anti-racist a particular political doctrine, which itself sows division. So I dug out, thinking about this in advance, I dug out Matthew 7:13-14. By the way, I don't normally refer everything back to scripture, but I thought you wouldn't mind.
I wouldn't mind.
Yeah. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Mm-hmm. And although that's obviously talking about Jesus, when it comes to Black Lives Matter and race relations, I feel that is very much on the issue, because there's all sorts of ways you can deny the problem, that's an error, or you can adopt an ideology of division, and all this talk about people recognizing their privilege. So I talked about that, and it did me no good at all with my own supporters. But if we end up, all of us, going through life having to try and catalogue our privileges compared to others, then that is just an ideology of division. I've got all sorts of disadvantages compared to people who can speak foreign languages or play music or any range of other things that I just can't do. But I do recognise that because I'm white, I have not suffered racism. And if that is white privilege, then that was what I was talking about. But even for me to say it caused all sorts of abuse and fear. Why people are afraid to have a conservative talk about these things. So to be very practical about it, everybody, as they go through their daily life, and politicians included, and police officers, have to think, actually, this is another human being I'm dealing with, and let's get alongside them where they are. And that includes recognising that people have all had a journey, different journeys, and they'll react to you differently depending on their own experiences. If people have spent many years being abused and treated with disadvantage, people shouldn't be surprised if they are a little bit aggressive when they're challenged.